Imagine spending your entire career trying to convince the world that airplanes have been built the wrong way all along. Most engineers spend their lives improving someone else's idea. Jack Northrop wanted to erase the airplane's tail completely. For 40 years, people told him it couldn't work. In the end, they were both right. Most stories have another side. This one's just a little stranger. I'm Bill, and this is Buffalo Air Park. Let's dive in. If you ask someone to draw an airplane, they'd probably sketch a fuselage, 2 wings, and a tail. It seems obvious. But to Jack Northrop, all those extra pieces look like unnecessary baggage. Beginning in the 1920s, Northrop became fascinated by one simple question. What if the entire airplane was a wing? Every square foot would produce lift. There'd be less drag, less weight, and more room for fuel and payload. It wasn't just an engineering exercise. He generally believed it was the future of aviation. Northrop even had a saying, "If something is efficient and beautiful, it is right." That philosophy would define the rest of his life. Of course, proving such an outrageous idea wasn't easy. So, in 1939, his company built a tiny experimental aircraft called the N-1M. Employees affectionately nicknamed it the Jeep. It wasn't meant to be pretty. It wasn't meant to break records. Its only job was answering one question. Could a tailless airplane actually fly? One of my favorite stories from this project sounds almost too ridiculous to be true. During one rainy weekend, Jack Northrop, Company Secretary Moy Stevens, and several engineers found themselves stuck inside a ranch house. With no wind tunnel available, they started folding paper airplanes. For hours, they experimented with different shapes, throwing them across the room and watching how they behaved. Eventually, they discovered that bending the wingtips downward made the little paper wings remarkably stable. That simple observation became one of the ideas carried into the real airplane. Sometimes aviation history is shaped by million-dollar laboratories. Sometimes it's shaped by paper airplanes. The N-1M itself looked unlike anything else in the sky. Built largely from wood and tubular steel, it was essentially a flying laboratory. Mechanics could actually change the wing sweep and wingtip angles on the ground between test flights, allowing engineers to compare different configurations. Its first flight wasn't even supposed to happen. On July 3, 1940, test pilot Vance Breeze was simply performing a high-speed taxi test across California's dry lake bed when the airplane bounced over rough ground, lifted about 10 feet into the air, and kept flying. The N-1M had accidentally made its maiden flight. Unfortunately, it barely wanted to stay there. Its little 65 horsepower engines simply didn't produce enough power. The airplane spent so much time skimming just above the ground that Northrop joked they had built an airplane with a 20-foot ceiling. Even Time magazine couldn't resist taking a shot, describing it as looking like a raptured, weather-racked duck. Not sure what that means. Eventually renowned aerodynamicist Theodore von Karman helped refine the airflow, and more powerful Franklin engines gave the little flying wing enough performance to climb away from ground effect. The concept had survived. That was all the Army Air Forces needed to see. With World War II raging, military planners began imagining something much larger. Much, much larger. They wanted a bomber capable of flying roughly 10,000 miles with a 10,000-pound bomb load. Northrop believed his flying wing could do exactly that. Before building the giant bomber, the company constructed 4 1/3 scale trainers called the N-9M. These wooden aircraft allowed engineers and pilots to learn how a flying wing actually behaved. Not every lesson came easily. In 1943, the first N-9M crashed during testing, killing test pilot Max Constant. Even so, development continued. Finally, in 1946, the enormous XB-35 emerged from the factory. It was breathtaking. Its wings stretched 172 feet across. There was no conventional fuselage because there didn't need to be one. The crew compartment, bomb bays, fuel tanks, and even folding bunks for relief crews all fit inside the wing itself. Looking at it today, it still feels like something that had arrived decades ahead of schedule. Unfortunately, the engines had other ideas. 4 massive Pratt & Whitney radial engines drove 8 contra-rotating pusher propellers through incredibly complicated gearboxes. On paper, the system promised excellent efficiency. In practice, it became a maintenance nightmare. Gearboxes overheated, propeller systems vibrated, reliability problems consumed countless hours of engineering effort. And while Northrop struggled with piston engines, aviation itself was changing. The war had ended. jets had arrived. The Air Force eventually decided to replace the propellers with 8 turbojet engines, creating the dramatic YB-49. If the XB-35 looked futuristic, the YB-49 looked like science fiction. It could exceed 520 miles per hour, but those early turbojets burned fuel at an astonishing rate, sacrificing the long range that had justified the flying wing in the first place. There was another problem. Without modern flight computers making thousands of corrections every second, the aircraft constantly hunted for stability. Pilots described an uncomfortable Dutch roll that made precision bombing extremely difficult. Today, we'd let software handle that. In 1948, software didn't exist. The Air Force canceled the program. For years, Jack Northrop believed the decision wasn't based solely on engineering. Later in his life, he claimed Air Force Secretary Stuart Symington had pressured him to merge with Convair. When Northrop refused, he believed politics sealed the fate of his flying wing. Historians still debate exactly how much politics influenced the decision. Others point to General Curtis LeMay's preference for the more conventional Convair B-36 and the flying wing's unresolved stability problems. Whatever the reason, the dream was over. Most of the remaining aircraft were scrapped. Northrop retired from the company that bore his name, convinced his life's work had failed. Or so he thought. In April 1980, the elderly Jack Northrop, frail, confined to a wheelchair, and unable to speak after several strokes, received a remarkable invitation. The Air Force showed him a classified scale model of its newest strategic bomber. As he studied it, he recognized the shape immediately. There it was, a pure flying wing. Modern computers had finally solved the stability problems that had defeated his generation. The airplane would become the B-2 Spirit. Holding the model in his hands, Northrop reportedly became emotional. He scribbled a single sentence on a notepad. "Now I know why God has kept me alive for the past 25 years. He passed away less than a year later. His impossible airplane had simply arrived 40 years too early. Sometimes history doesn't reject a great idea. Sometimes it just isn't ready for it yet. And that wraps up another tale from aviation's stranger side. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.